So as you know, we're changing the gearbox today, and between the gearbox sits the flywheel and the clutch. The purpose of the flywheel is threefold really. Primarily it's to transmit the engine torque through the clutch to the gearbox, and it does that by sandwiching the clutch plate itself, the friction plate, between the outer part of the clutch and this surface of the flywheel, so that the flywheel transmits it to the friction plate, the clutch, which then transmits it to the gearbox. Also around the edge here you can see teeth. They are where the starter motor engages, and that's what starts the engine. And the third function is its weight. It's got a lot of weight to it. This one weighs nearly 8 kilos as standard, and it makes the engine run smoother, it makes gear changes smoother, it makes the whole driving experience smoother for a road car. By contrast, the new one we're putting in, apart from being lovely and shiny, it's got lots of holes cut in it, as you can see, to make it lighter. And if you compare the back of this one to the back of this one, you can see there's a lot more material been removed. It does the same functions as this clutch does in terms of starting the engine and transmitting the engine torque to the gearbox, but being lighter, it means that we can rev the engine quicker, so it can get up to revs quicker, which is a benefit because around the track, if you can rev the engine quicker, that means you can get up to speed quicker, which should translate into quicker lap times. The downsides to it are the engine's going to run a little bit more lumpy or less smooth. The gear changes will be slightly more tricky, I expect, and the throttle response will also be a lot sharper because it's picking up that bit quicker. So this is our G6 PG1 gearbox with the long ratio gearbox for our 111S. It's good for a road car, but not so good for a race car. And so we're trying to convert our road car into a race car. We needed to do something about it. We could either buy a new gearbox, which is an expensive way of doing it, or buy a second-hand gearbox, which is a cheaper way of doing it, but risky because you don't know the life of that gearbox. And what we didn't want to do is arrive at a racetrack and find that it is just full of house bricks. Essentially what we've done with our gearbox is had a 3.9 ratio that was in this, and have changed it. So we've had this one removed and had a 4.2 ratio put in as the final drive. That will reduce the ratios for all the gears that are in this because the final drive is less. And we've had the synchros all done, we've had the engine rebuilt, the gearbox rebuilt, and including the steel cage bearings, the seals, and a selector fork mod. So essentially we're hoping that we can put the flywheel on, put this on, not forgetting the clutch, hopefully, and fill it with oil, and we'll be able to put it in first gear by the end of today. Thermostat. It's been recommended that we do it, and so the role of the thermostat is to restrict and stop the water going through the complete cooling system
while the engine is trying to warm up to operating temperature. And that's important on a road car, because you turn the key, you want the engine to warm up as quick as possible so you can go to work or whatever you're going to do with it. The role of it on a race car actually can be quite damaging. So this particular setup with the engine and mid-engine car, thermostat is in the engine, but the cooling system, the radiator, is right at the front. So it has a large volume of water that is actually being restricted by this thermostat, and it's being held at a much colder temperature, like no temperature at all. And then when the engine gets up to temperature, you might be out on circuit and it's working hard, very hot, thermostat opens, all that freezing cold water rushes in and actually can do some damage to this K-series. So it could actually warp the head and requiring head gasket changes and all that kind of stuff. So it's important that before you go out on circuit, you make sure that the radiator is hot and you can feel that the thermostat is open. But looking at the size of the hole that this restricts the water flow at, even when it's open, you're restricting its cooling ability. So what we've done is remove this. We've put the housing back on the system, so it's just a complete open system, and it will mean that the engine takes longer to warm up, but once it is up to operating temperature, we'll then go out on circuit with no fear that a rush of cold water is going to damage our engine and cause a problem. One of the things that we've learned off of the engine builder and various people that have been involved in this with us is that the engines run really hot. Specifically, the gearboxes in the backs of these cars run hot because the airflow isn't there. So at the moment we're running standard power, 151, something like that. Eventually we want to get more power, so we'll have to tune the engine, but that's going to put more strain on our gearbox, and the only outcome from that will be more heat. So it was recommended that there was some selector mods that I spoke about earlier, and that's because the gearbox runs very hot. So we need to get more cooling over the casing of the gearbox. We could run a gearbox cooler, but that's later on, and we're going to get some air to flow over the gearbox casing. But if it's going to flow over it, it needs somewhere to come out. So the problem with the boots on these cars is that they don't let much air out. It gets hotter and hotter, and it's got a flat under tray. There's no airflow from underneath either. So what we've done is remove the plastic, 20-year-old nearly, this car. So the plastic covers, and we've replaced it with mesh. So there's a lot more airflow out. And that's what we've done. So hopefully that will help with the temperature of the gearbox. It'll give it longevity for our endurance racing, and that is about it. Don't forget your shirt, Graham.
Oh, thanks. Cheers, Ben.
I should, it might be a bit baggy actually.
Thanks,
Anyway, so it's got dark. We've had a long day in the garage. We managed to get the gearbox married up to the side of the engine. The lugs, the male and female lugs, proved to be a bit of a problem, but we've tried a few different things. It eventually worked, and the starter motor's back in, the drive shafts are done, and it's filled up with oil. So we think we are good to go from a gearbox perspective. As you can see, the car is definitely not ready to go, but when we filmed as much as we can today, so from a gearbox perspective, we're happy.
And the next thing to do is to put the suspension back on, which is all sat on the floor at the moment. Make sure all the geometry is right. We need to go and get it properly aligned on a wheel alignment rig, and then after that we're going to go and do some testing, and hopefully everything will work okay.
Fingers crossed.
Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.